Kia ora everyone and welcome back to the IAMax channel. I'm Mahi here. In my last video I talked about Azure Virtual Networks or VNets. What are they and how to create one? And I also talked about the fact that resources inside of VNets are allowed to automatically talk to each other by default. So if you want to change this behavior and allow only specific type of traffic to reach your resources, this is where you use what is called the Azure Network Security Group. So in this video, I'll talk about what is the Azure Network Security Group and how to create one. So let's dive in. To start, let's first talk about what is the Azure Network Security Group. So the Azure Network Security Group is a basic virtual firewall that you could either assign to your subnet, like the NSG1 here, or you could assign to your virtual machine, like the NSG2. You could also assign the same NSG or Network Security Group to more than one machine or resource if they have the same network security rules. For example, in this case, we've got NSG2 assigned both to VM1 and to VM3 because they have the same security policies. It doesn't matter that VM1 and VM3 are in different subnets. You could still use it. You could also have a virtual machine that does not have any network security group assigned to it, like the VM4, although this is not recommended, as that means that your machine does not have any type of security here. Azure NSG follows the 5 tuples model, which means that you need a source IP, a destination IP, a source port, and a destination port, and then protocol type, which could either be a TCP or a UDP. When you create an Azure NSG Firewall rule, you need to give it a name. You need to also specify the source and destination IPs and source and destination protocol, and then you need to specify the action. So you need to tell it, do you want to allow this type of traffic or do you want to deny it? Azure NSG firewalls use what is called a priority. So the priority number is used by Azure to decide which firewall rule to evaluate first. So the higher the number is, like the 65,000, the lower the priority. So for example, in our case here, these 3 rules will be evaluated last. This is really important because based on this, Azure would decide what to do with any type of traffic. For example, in our case here, we've got the last rule, deny all inbound. This rule will deny any type of traffic. So if you want to allow any other type of traffic, you have to give it a higher priority and then decide that you want to allow it. This way, Azure will evaluate it first, decide that this type of traffic actually matches this rule, and the action is allow, and then it will stop evaluating any other rule. So it will not reach the last rule, which is deny all. One thing to note here that you can't have 2 rules with the same priority. Each time you create a new network security group, it comes with default rules that you can't delete. Those rules comes with a very high numerical value of a priority, which means it's a really low priority for you to make it easy for you to override. For example, in this case here, we've got this rule, the 65,500, which says deny all inbound traffic. This rule will deny all type of traffic inbound. And the same rule for the outbound security rules, we've got the rule of deny all outbound traffic. To override this rule, create a new security rule and give it a higher priority. This way, Azure will evaluate it first and will allow your traffic. For example, in our case here, we created a rule. We gave it a priority 100. The rule is to allow RDP. So Azure will evaluate this rule before evaluating the last one and would allow our traffic. Before we move on, I just want to talk a little bit about those default rules. So we've got allow VNet inbound. This rule is to allow all VNet traffic inside of a VNet. Allow Azure Load Balancer inbound to allow the Azure Load Balancers to reach your virtual machines. And this is the deny all inbound, or what is also called implicit deny. And for the outbound traffic, we've got another rule to allow all outbound VNet traffic, and also allow your virtual machines to reach the internet, which this rule is used for, allow internet outbound. And then finally, the implicit deny again with the deny all outbound. One very important aspect here is what is called the Azure NSG effective rule. So if your virtual machine has more than one NSG assigned to it, in our case here, we've got VM1 has NSG1 assigned to it, to its network interface card. And then we've got NSG2 assigned to the subnet that contains the VM1. So both NSG will apply to the virtual machine. And in the same case, we've got a VM2 in the same subnet that got NSG2 assigned to it. So how is traffic being evaluated by Azure when a traffic comes in to a virtual machine? For the inbound traffic, the subnet NSG is evaluated first, So in this case, we've got two types of traffic. We've got HTTPS and we've got an ICMP traffic, which is ping. The NSG2 would allow, have a network security rule to allow both type of traffics. So this traffic is allowed by NSG2. For VM1, we decided that we don't want the ICMP traffic. So on NSG2, we allowed the HTTPS traffic, but denied the ICMP. So in the end, what's going to happen? The HTTPS traffic, will be allowed through to VM1. For the VM2, both type of traffic will be allowed because they are using the rules in the NSG2, which allows both type of traffic. So as a rule of thumb, put the very specific security rules closer to your resource. So in our case here, we wanted to deny ICMP traffic to VM1. So that rule, we put it on the NSG closer to VM1, which is NSG1. And the general rules should be put on the subnet level. So now that we are ready, let's see how we can implement this on the Azure portal. To start, let's talk a little bit about our setup here today. So from the Azure portal, we'll go to virtual machines. And in here, we've got two VMs, VM1 and VM2. They are part of the same VNet and also part of the same subnet. What we want to do here, we want to create two network security groups. We want to assign one network security group to the subnet level, and create another security group and assign it to VM1. What we'll do, we will allow the HTTPS traffic and the ICMP traffic on the subnet level, but we will block the ICMP traffic on the NSG associated with VM1. So what would end up happening here is that on VM1, I will be able to use HTTPS traffic, but not ICMP because of the NSG associated with it. And on the second VM, part of the same subnet, I will be able to open up use HTTPS and ICMP traffic. So let's do that. On the Azure portal, from the Azure portal search, type in network security groups and select network security groups from the search results. To create a new network security group, click on the plus create, assign it to a resource group, and then give it a name. So we'll call it IAMAX NSG subnet. And then click review and create, and then finally create. We'll go back and create the second network security group. Go back to home and to network security groups, and then create the second one. Assign it to a resource group, and then give it a name. We'll call this one NSG VM1. Review and create, and then finally create. If we go back to the virtual machines here, if we go back to the Azure portal and then virtual machines, and if we click on the VM1 and under the setting, if we click on the networking tab, in here we could we'll see what type of security role that we've got associated with the virtual machine. So as you can see here, we don't have any NSG associated with the virtual machine network interface card. So it says that this network interface does not contain a network security group. If we click on the VM2, again, we don't have, sorry, just a second. Yeah, so again, we don't have a network security group associated with the network interface card for the VM2. So let's go back to the resource network security group, sorry. And let's start associating our NSGs that we just created with the subnet and with the first virtual machine VM1, and let's see how is that going to change the networking tab on each VM. So let's click on the NSG subnet, and on the left side panel under setting, click on subnet, and then click on the plus associate. Specify which virtual network you want to associate your NSG with. In our case, it's IMX VNet. And then decide on which subnet you want to associate it with. In our case here, it's subnet 1. Hit OK. And as you can see here, our NSG is now associated with subnet 1. So if we go back to our virtual machines, go back to VM1, and then again to networking. As you can see here, we now have the network security group IMX NSG associated with the first VM. We click on the second VM. Because both of them are part of the same subnet, they both have now NSG associated, the NSG subnet associated with them. I want to assign the last network security group, the one for VM1, and click on the NSG VM1, click on the network interfaces on the left side panel, and then again click on associate, and then pick the VM1, so IMX NEC VM1. This will associate this NSG with our virtual machine VM1. As you can see now, the second NSG is associated with VM1. Let's go back to the virtual machines. Let's go to VM1 and again to networking. And as you can see here, we now, for VM1, have two NSG associated with it. The network security group for the subnet, and also the network security group for the virtual machine. If we go to VM2, we should see that it's only associated with one network security group, which is the one associated for the subnet. To add a new role, let's go back to our network security group, and then let's go to the network security group for the subnet. To add a new role, inbound role, click on the under setting for the inbound role, and then click the add button to add the new role. So in here, we start to put the details for the policy that we want to add here. So the first thing is what we want to allow is RDP, so that remote desktop protocol, so that we will be able to RDP to our machine. So to do that, we'll set the source to be any source. So we'll be able to RDP to the machine from any source, and the destination to any, and then under the service, I'll pick RDP. When I'll pick RDP service, the protocol will be set to TCP automatically, and then the port to the RDP port, which is 3389. The action is allow, and I'll give it a very high priority, so the number 100, so that will be always allowed, and I'll call it RDP. To add the new policy, hit add. And as you can see here, we now have our new policy added to the NSG. We go back to the virtual machines and click on VM1 and to networking again. As you can see now, for the subnet NSG, we've got RDP allowed. To be able to RDP to this VM, we must have the RDP allowed on both NSGs. So in this case, we need to add another inbound rule to allow RDP on the NSG associated with the VM itself. So we'll just go through the same RDP, then the same priority, and call it RDP. And let's add it. Now that RDP is allowed on both NSG, we'll be able to RDP to the VM1. As for VM2, we don't need, we already will be able to RDP to this machine immediately because it has only one NSG associated with it. Next, let's try to RDP to our machines. And as you can see here, we are able to access our machine. So that's a good sign, which means our RDP policy is working. This is the first VM. And if we open up a website here, we could see that our traffic to the internet is being allowed. And if we try to ping, let's say, Google, a ping here is allowed. Let's check the other machine. And again here. So this is our second virtual machine. And we also have access to the internet, and we are able to also ping. What I'll do next is that I'll block ping on the NSG associated with the first virtual machine. This will stop the ping on the first VM, and I'll leave it allowed on the NSG associated with the subnet. So what will end up happening here is that the first virtual machine will not be able to have ping, and then the second virtual machine will be able, as the NSG associated with the subnet allows ping. So let's do that. In this case, we want to add an outbound policy. So I'll click on the outbound rules, and under the NSG associated with the VM, click on add an outbound rule. And it will be from any source with any source port, with a star signifying any source port, sorry. And then any destination IP address, and then for the destination port, we'll use a star here again. And for the protocol, we'll pick ICMP, and then we'll deny it. We'll leave the priority to 100, and then we'll name it deny all ping. So as you can see here, our policy is now added to the virtual machine. So let's check if our virtual machine will still have ping. And as you can see here, ping is now not working. We should still have connection to the internet, and we still do. Let's go to the second virtual machine. Let's ping in here, and ping is working here because the NSG associated with the subnet that is applying on the VM2 did not block ping. The one last concept that I wanted to talk about here today is what is called the effective security rule. We've got multiple NSGs assigned to our VM, and it could become really hard to understand which policy is going to be applied for the inbound and for the outbound. For that, Microsoft Azure has provided us with what is called the effective security rule. What does that mean is that this is what Microsoft Azure will use in the end. So if you have a general rule that is like less specific on the subnet, and a very specific or more specific rule on the virtual machine, this will tell you which one is getting applied on your resource. So in our case today, for our virtual here, we see that this is what we have got here. So for the inbound, we've got RDP, we've got the VNet traffic, and so on. And then for the outbound here, we've got the deny all ping. And as you can see here, it's telling us what is the scope of this, which is the network interface card for the first virtual machine. I hope you found this video useful, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, stay strong, kia kaha. See ya.